Welcome everyone to the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pickering. That's right, Lo-Fi's and low fidelity, low quality, in your face, messy as can be global news show. Here we're going to talk about that famous question, what's going on in the world today? We'll be covering 5 headlines from across the globe, and then choose one to go into a more detailed analysis. For our third story of the day, we'll be focusing on the country of Iran with that lo-fi style country profile. But first, the news fresh off the press. Source: BBC World News, Africa section. Nigeria's campus cults, Buccaneers, Black Axe, and other feared groups. You know how universities typically have social clubs? You know, sororities and fraternities? Well, this isn't that. Although the above mentioned groups in the headline do claim to be university fraternities, they are banned in the country due to the use of violence and links to numerous types of criminal activity. These university groups, like so many others in the mid-1900s, started out as pro-independence groups of university students looking to make their country a better place. The implications. You know some of those fraternities and sorority groups that say they're one thing, but then after you join it's really all about drinking and partying? Well, these groups here, they're like that, but not at all like that. Over time, after the independence of Nigeria was achieved, these groups evolved into power structures in different areas. Once being centered in universities, then being banned countrywide, they still exist around the university structure, but also recruit people younger than college age. In essence, in other countries, these would simply be called gangs. People join these university groups to get protection from other university groups. Simply put, it's a protection racket, i.e. U.S. organized crime, the Italian mafia, the Mexican cartels. There's no difference here, except for the fact that these groups grew out of the university clubs. We'll be watching for more stories about these groups in the future for sure. Next up, source: Reuters World News. Lebanese pound slides further despite new pricing system. The Lebanese economy has been having a hard time even before current global conditions. This latest story is specifically dealing with trying to ease that roughness in the economy. Inflation has been increasing fast in the country, and people have been pulling out their money from banks and buying foreign currency with it to help keep the value of their money. While this makes sense at the individual level, at the system level, it has major implications for the economy of the country. The implications? When any country goes through recessions and the currency drops values, many of its citizens buy foreign currency that is more stable, like the US dollar in this case. As their domestic currency goes to international sellers and buyers of the currency, the country itself starts having less and less hard money of its own, because it's now being held by the international institutions, which are generally holding that currency, waiting for the value to rebound, and then will sell that currency for a profit. If you didn't know, currency trading is a huge money-making market across the globe. The Lebanese government can't just print more dollars, because that would simply increase inflation. So they put limits and regulations on the buying and selling of currency in hope of stabilizing it so that Lebanon can get a recovery aid package from the IMF to deal with the economic recession. This is just a small snapshot of one part of the Lebanese economic crisis. We'll be watching to see how these new regulations play out and how the deal with the IMF goes moving forward. And now it's time to move forward because we never move on. It's time for our country profile of the day on Iran. Geography lesson, Lo-Fi Nation. Iran is bordered by the Caspian Sea to the north, Turkmenistan to the northeast, Afghanistan to the east, Pakistan to the southeast, the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf to the south, Iraq to the west, Turkey and Armenia to the northwest, and Azerbaijan to the north. Iran, as the country we know it as today, was founded in 1979, though Iran as Persia goes back well over 2,500 years. The 2017 World Bank GDP per capita of the country was just over $5,600 a year. Freedom House, covering civil liberties and civil rights around the world, gave Iran an 18 out of 100 and not free rating in both 2019 and 2018. Reporters Without Borders, ranking 180 countries and territories across the globe via media freedom, placed Iran as 164 out of 180 in 2018 and 170 out of 180 in 2019, meaning media freedoms are decreasing. Transparency International, with its ranking of 198 countries and territories across the globe via their Corruption Perception Index, in 2019 ranked Iran as 146 out of 198 countries, down 8 places from last year. In short, Iran is an authoritarian state, continuing down that path, and its economic performance is better than most countries in the world, but still developing. Now, what's been happening in Iran lately? Simply put, a whole lot. Here goes a try at some of the more recent events in past years. In 2014, the Iran nuclear deal was signed, bringing an end to many sanctions against the country and international observers to review their nuclear program. In 2018, the U.S. pulls out of that deal and starts adding more sanctions back to Iran. More recently, Iran has threatened to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal as well. Now, Iran is also involved in the conflicts in Yemen and Syria. And Iran in 2019 or in 2020 gets into scuffles with Saudi Arabia and the U.S., specifically after the U.S. targets and assassinates a top Iranian general via a drone strike. Iran and Venezuela started trading lots of gasoline and oil recently. This week it was reported that international observers of the country's nuclear program are being blocked from 2 sites in particular. And most recently this week, Iran and the U.S. have engaged in a prisoner swap, though only 1 person each. And that, Lo-Fi Nation, is the short list of what's been going on in Iran lately. There's so much more to talk about, and so much more to watch for. Iran is definitely a country in the world today worth keeping our eyes on. And now for our Headline in the Spotlight segment. Source: Reporters Without Borders. France, making police unidentifiable in media. The proposed French bill would seriously restrict press freedom. That's right, France, which is ranked 34th in the world as far as media freedoms by Reporters Without Borders, is about to go down on that list if this bill passes. This law, not yet before the National Assembly in the country, which is the name of their parliament, is intended to protect police from retribution from the public for observed or perceived abuses of power. This law would make any journalist, or anyone who takes a picture with a police officer in it, have to blur out the picture of the police officer. In a single photo, that may be easy enough, but for videos, that takes some special software and practice to do. And those people taking cell phone videos, good luck with that. The implications of this story. Taking pictures of people that don't want to be photographed is a pain, that's for sure. If you've ever been the subject of a photo by some stranger and try to engage in conversation about why they're taking your photo without asking, you know it's a weird conversation. But this legislation isn't that. If you work for government, in a democracy, you are a public worker. You work for the people. The people pay you. The people create the outline of your job description. You are a public employee. In such circumstances, there is no such thing as privacy. The only way democracies, the people, are able to make sure their wishes and votes are being carried out is to have government be completely transparent. This bill goes against that transparency. It goes against freedom of the press. And sadly, just like in so many countries in the world today, the bill hides behind the reasoning of security. A moment, Lo-Fi listeners. Watch your ears. Let me holler at France for a second. Hey, France! Knock it off! You're a democracy, remember? Sorry about that. We'll be keeping an eye out on this one for sure moving forward. And a last piece of news from AP Technology section. IBM quits facial recognition, joins calls for police reform. In an apparent about-face from the tech company, they will no longer pursue development of facial recognition software as the company states it adds to government's ability to mass surveil the public and racial profile its citizens. The implications. Well, what do we have here? A tech company with a conscience? A tech company admitting its software could be used by governments for nefarious purposes? A tech company that's, I don't know, perhaps doing the right thing? Lo-Fi listeners, watch your ears again. Let me holler at IBM for a second. Hey IBM! The software's already out there and government's already doing it. Wouldn't you call this, I don't know, a bit late to the party? Get out of here, IBM. Finally catching up with your conscience because it's trending at the moment. I already have a computer. I'm not going to buy one from you just because you're doing what's popular at the moment. Check yourself, IBM. And that's a brief snapshot of what's going on in the world today. Always remember that Lofi Poli Sci is more than just me. It's the we that we be. Please write in with your questions, comments, or requests for countries for our news segments or top 10 global lists you want to see to lofipolisci at planetmail.com. That's lofi, L-O-F-I, poly, P-O-L-I, sci, S-C-I, at planetmail.com. Let me say thank you so much for listening. Stay safe, wash those hands, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. Pickering, signing off.